Welcome to this edition of Mississippi Happening Podcast. My name is David Oles, and Jim Newman cannot be with us today. This is the second episode of the series, Religion and Politics in America. We had a great conversation with the Reverend Hugh Hollowell in the first series, and I am equally excited to get this episode started as well. Joining us today is Robert S. McIlvaine. I ran across him during doing research for the series, and also he was recommended by a friend of mine. He is an historian. He is emeritus professor at Millsaps College in Jackson, Mississippi. He's the author of 8 books, and he edited 3. Bob, it's great to have you with us today.
Great to be with you, David.
Bob is the author of one of the books that I do want to talk about today. It is Grand Theft Jesus. This is a book that he published in 2008, Grand Theft Jesus, The Hiking of Religion in America Today. And it is available on Amazon Kindle for $5.99. I bought the book, and it is a very good read. These are a couple of reviews of the book, and the first one comes from Governor William Winter, former governor. He wrote, McIlvaine, in writing this book, is performing a great service for the American people by opening our eyes to the political and spiritual slippery slopes we find ourselves in. Grand Theft Jesus is just exactly what we need to counter the disturbing political forces that are seeking to co-opt religion in our country for their very selfish purposes. And that was from Governor William Winter. There's another one, 2 more I want to leave with you. And this is from Reverend Alan Story, Calvary Methodist Church, South Africa. Jesus never wrote a book, but I recognize his handwriting in Grand Theft Jesus. Like Jesus, McIlvaine uses lively illustrations and a serious sense of humor to cleanse the temple of exclusive and exploitative religion. And that was Alan's Story. And finally, and this is George Carlin. He wrote, if Robert McIlvaine had been Jesus's lawyer, Pontius Pilate would have released him on his own recognizances. I love that. And that's from George Carlin. So, Bob, talk to me. That was 2008. What do you think about 2026 and what's happening today?
Well, it's a whole lot worse. At the time I wrote the book, this movement of the religious right was gaining strength. I was very disturbed at so many people who call themselves Christians, and this was the case even nearly 20 years ago when I wrote the book. I suppose I was already writing it actually 20 years ago, and who don't seem to teach what Jesus taught. There's so many that they preach what I refer to in the book as easy Jesus. You don't have to really do anything. You don't have to follow any of the hard stuff that Jesus taught. You just believe in Jesus and he will make you rich. Well, that's not what Jesus said, not by a long shot. And people and of course I call it easy Jesus because you don't have to sacrifice anything except send money to the preacher. But you're promised even when you send money to the preacher, you will get returns, not in terms of blessings, unless you count monetary blessings, you might. So it's a total perversion of what Jesus taught, and I found that upsetting. Back when I was working on it, and even before that, going back even to the time of Jimmy Swaggart and Jerry Falwell and such, a friend of mine who's a Methodist minister and also a professor of religious studies, very much a Jesus follower himself, got so tired of these people who call themselves Christians taking the name, that he said, if you're going to call me a Christian and lead to me being associated with those people, don't call me a Christian. Call me an SOB if you want, but not a Christian. And that's kind of where things are. People who actually believe in the teachings of Jesus are people who those who claim to be Christians scorn. They say, well, one of the things I have a lot of sort of humorous things that make a point in the book, but one of them I have a 9+5 theses. 90. I didn't have enough. I couldn't come up with 95 theses like Luther, but so I had 9+5 about the book, and one of them is that the principal thing that Jesus taught was empathy. Putting yourself in the shoes of another person, trying to help those who are in need. And now the leading voices on the right take, if we must, Elon Musk as an example. He says that empathy is the greatest bug in Western civilization. Empathy will destroy Western civilization. We can't have any of that. I guess we need to have people pursuing a $1 trillion fortune instead. That's what Western civilization is all about. And of course, he's not totally wrong. A good deal of Western civilization has been more that way, but it certainly is not what Jesus taught.
Gotcha. I remember many years ago, The Prayer of Jabez was a book that came out, and it was all about wealth and power. Talk to us a little bit about, let's talk about the separation of church and state for a little bit. Tell us about that.
Well, it's one among many of the things that the Christian nationalists, as they call themselves, totally pervert from what was the American way. They claim that the United States was founded as a Christian nation. That's absolutely untrue. In fact, the ideals of the United States came out of the Enlightenment, which was a movement towards rationality and away from just believing in supernatural things. Most of the people who were the leading figures in the American Revolution and writing the Declaration and the Constitution were deists. That is, that they believed that there had to be a God as a sort of, they referred to as a watchmaker who sort of set everything in motion, and then just let the motions of the watch, the gears of the watch, be guided by the laws of science and not particularly intervene with it. But one of the things they were most worried about was that as they looked at history and looked at what was going on in the 18th century and centuries leading up to that in Europe, was that everywhere the church was combined with the monarch, with whatever the government was. And this was a disaster because you had to either follow the religion that the monarch imposed on you, or you were going to be in big trouble. And so they intentionally set out to have the churches, any religions, not just Christians, that should arise or be brought to America to be on their own, be free to practice whatever they wanted. They wanted religion to be free from government and government to be free from religion. To the point where Thomas Jefferson, of course, the principal author of the Declaration of Independence, was extremely impressed reading the Gospels of Jesus. And he said, this is the greatest moral code anybody has ever created. And so, but he wasn't into the supernatural parts of it. And so he wrote his version of a Bible, which was not him saying anything, but simply putting all of the moral teachings of what people must do and how they should get along with each other and help each other and remove the supernatural things. And this is basically where our country was coming from. They saw it bad for religion to have the government controlling religion, because it necessarily meant that this is only going to be one religion and all others will be repressed. People, if we're going to be free, we have to have freedom of religion as well. So this idea, they talk about God. Actually, Jefferson talks in the Declaration about nature's God, which is not perhaps quite the same as the God the right-wingers talk about today. But they were absolutely intent on it not being a Christian nation. That doesn't mean at all that they didn't want us to be following the prescriptions of Jesus for how we should act and how we should get along, but not practicing any single religion.
Understood. Thank you. How does Christian nationalism, how does that or does it relate to fascism?
Very much so. This idea of Christian nationalism, it's using religion to seize absolute power is common, whether that be from monarchies in the past centuries or from fascist movements in the 20th century. The idea that you can say that you are somehow chosen by God, God chose our country, and they usually insist God chose me, whoever the leader is says chose me, and therefore you should obey me the way you would obey God. The Christian nationalism, Jesus wasn't in favor of nationalism. Jesus wanted to welcome the stranger, all this sort of thing. Christian nationalism is simply an attempt to use religion to gain power. Christian nationalism is the equivalent of Islamic nationalism. It's the equivalent of the mullahs in Iran, the Afghanistan, these places where they want to impose. And, you know, they're talking, these Christian nationalists talk about wanting to create Christian laws that everyone in the United States must follow at the same time that they're ridiculously warning us that Sharia law is about to be imposed on us. I don't think so. But the Christian laws might be a little bit different, but they would be very similar, and people would be being punished, being imprisoned, perhaps even killed for going against some law of a particular religion. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's kind of frightening. And I've always thought like you mentioned earlier, the separation of church and state is for the protection of the church. I mean, that's just my humble opinion.
Well, your humble opinion is right. Not just a matter by which I don't mean I disagree with it, but if you look at the facts, the documents, and it's right.
A lot that we hear from the evangelicals is that, you know, it's always the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. They talk about the 10 Commandments, but one of the things they seem to overlook, and something that I go to a lot, try to go to a lot, is the Beatitudes. You've got the 10 Commandments here, and then you've got the Beatitudes over here. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, first of all, the 10 Commandments, as you very rightly and appropriately said, are thou shalt not, things that you're not supposed to do. Certainly Jesus also talked about things you're not supposed to do, but the emphasis was on the things you should be doing. And as far as following things in the old Hebrew law and the Torah, 10 Commandments are one thing. I mean, basically, there's nothing wrong with at least most of them. But Jesus specifically said that he was bringing a new law. He said, you have been told, for instance, you have been told to love your neighbor and hate your enemy. I'm saying, no, you need to love your enemy as well. And this is the sort of thing that, well, the reason I refer to the right-wing people as easy Jesus, they basically say, love your enemy, give to the poor. Basically, that word well, I'll use the word crap. For some reason, one four-letter word's acceptable, another isn't. That crap's too hard. We're just going to ignore that. They don't pay any attention. The essence of Jesus' teaching is a Sermon on the Mount. But that stuff, they don't want anything to do with that because that's hard. So I bring it up on my screen here and read it to you.
Okay.
The Jesus Thieves Beatitudes.
Jesus Thieves, I like that.
Yeah, that's part of the title of the book. So this is basically the way it seems to me they take the Beatitudes. Blessed are the haughty in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who exalt over others, for they shall be further rewarded. Blessed are the arrogant, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for domination, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are those who show no mercy, for they shall obtain the wealth of others. Blessed are the hard in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the war makers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who persecute for their own sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when you revile others and persecute others and utter all sorts of evil against them falsely on my account. So that's, of course, meant to be somewhat humorous, but it is also, I think, a pretty accurate way of the way they are reading Jesus. One of the, in many Bibles, I'm not sure which ones do it that way, but the words of Jesus are written in red. And one of the things I say in Grand Theft Jesus is to most of these Christianity light people, that's LITE, like not fattening. Actually, maybe it is fattening. They want to be fattened, but anyway, to them the words in red are the unread words. They really pay almost no attention to anything Jesus said. What do they focus on politically? They focus mainly on homosexuality and abortion. And as far as homosexuality is concerned, I believe Paul may have mentioned something here and there. I mean, some of these people are closer to Paulists than they are to Christians. I know a lot of biblical scholars believe that there were two different Pauls, the good Paul and the bad Paul, but because some of the things don't seem to line up at all. But basically, if you look at anything Jesus said, he never condemned homosexuality. They go back to Leviticus, and a man shall not lie with another man as with a woman. And as a result of that, because it's an abomination to the Lord your God. Well, there are 613, I believe, laws in the Mitzvot in the Hebrew Bible. As far as I can tell, almost nobody pays any attention to any of them. But they want to emphasize this one in particular. When again, Jesus said, that's the old law. I'm telling you something different. It's interesting to me. Well, they also use that same term for it's an abomination to the Lord your God on all sorts of things, like wearing clothes appropriate to the other sex. Well, for the most part, men still don't do that, but women have been wearing clothes, it's men's clothes with no problem for a long time. But it's an abomination to the Lord. They should have done to them, I guess, whatever they want to do to homosexuals. But also, right, it says a man shall not lie with another man as with a woman. It says absolutely nothing, as far as I can see, anywhere in the Bible about a woman lying with a woman as with a man, which I guess is either. I mean, we need to keep in mind that these are not laws from God. These are laws made up by an ancient civilization, a bunch of men who were creating laws that they thought should be nice laws, and kind of like the Christian nationalists today, trying to put the seal of God on them. And it may have never occurred to them that women could do things with other women, but it's not there. And yet, of course, people today have no idea of that, and they just say, all this was condemned by God. Well, Jesus did not condemn it. That's not to say he approved of it, but if he thought it was like the most important thing, you'd think he would mention it. Same thing with abortion. Abortion was very common in the ancient world, and the time Jesus was around. Never said anything about that either. And again, that doesn't mean he was saying it was a good thing. Certainly not that, or that he thought it might be a bad thing. But it clearly was not what he was emphasizing. What he was emphasizing, and I don't know, I saw this number, I can't remember what it was, but something like 500 or 600 times he talks about the requirement to help the poor, help the destitute. They don't want to do any of that. They just want to go around looking for homosexuals, stopping women from having control over their bodies.
Understood. You talked about those laws. I'm a big fan of The West Wing, and there's a great scene President Bartlett, is talking to this woman is sitting down, but anyway, he recognized her. They get this conversation, and he talks about the tight ass society, which he talks about the laws and the different things that the law says when she throws up homosexuality. So I love that episode of The West Wing. What was the one of the things that you talked about was taking care of your neighbor. Who is your neighbor? Yeah,
that's a very good question, because try to condense this as much as I can, but it does sort of come naturally to humans to feel the most connection with those closest to them, their immediate family, their extended family, and then going back through prehistory, generally relatively small numbers, a few hundred people who might be in their group, but at the same time drawing a line around who is considered sort of concentric circles. You care most about the people you are most related to, and the further out you get, the less connected. And that may have worked all right when societies were simple and there wasn't much wealth, and most people were living in groups where they didn't really run into people who were too different. But as populations grew, as people started living in cities, even in the ancient world, much smaller cities than we have today, of course, but they're in contact with different people. And so basically what I think happened, and it's not just with the Hebrews, but what the Hebrews were doing was taking the concept of neighbor and stretching it out to be the people of Israel, not, not just your close relatives, not the people who live in your town or even your local area, but to see everybody the people of Israel. And a lot of these laws are what you are not allowed to do to your brethren, the people of Israel, but you can do it to other people. Thou shalt not enslave your brethren, the people of Israel, but you can enslave other people. You shall not harm anybody in your own group, but you can do it to outsiders. So they're extending it. And I think, and Jesus was not the only one doing this. The Buddha, for instance, a few hundred years earlier, was kind of doing the same thing. Confucius kind of suggested the same thing. One of the things Confucius put out, and basically the same thing that Jesus put out, I think is best translated as do unto others as you would unto brothers. That is to extend this feeling to everybody. Now, that's very difficult to do because we have this innate idea to, distrust strangers. Presumably that was evolutionarily beneficial because the strangers might be dangerous. But in a world where people are all mixed together and have different beliefs and look different, and that really is kind of one of the things the United States was based on, that we would have, dare I say, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Welcome people from everywhere. They constantly talking about that at the time of the revolution.
It seems through the years, words have changed meaning. Conservative back 20, 30, 40 years ago meant one thing. And today it means totally another. The word Christian. Who is a Christian? I had a conversation with my minister the other day when I was at church, and we were a great guy. We have great conversations. And I'm not a Christian. And he kind of backed up and looked at me, and he says, what? I says, in today's world, I don't follow what the evangelicals are preaching. I don't consider myself one of them. I don't consider Jesus light. I am a follower of Christ. When Trump came into office, all of these Christians, evangelicals, followed him. Help me to understand why they did that, or why are they doing that?
Well, I don't know. It makes no sense, except, there are a lot of people who kind of want to be told what to do. This is very strange because in addition to the so-called Christians following with Trump and all these people, and as you say, calling themselves conservatives is ludicrous. I mean, I am not somebody most people would refer to as a conservative, but I'm way more conservative than these people are. I would like to conserve the ideals of 1776 and the Constitution and build a better America that heads towards those goals. But these people want to overturn it all. They are basically fascists. I mean, and they're following Trump made the same sort of appeals that Hitler did and uses the same tactics where he just repeats the same thing over and over and over like advertisements do. And it just seeps into people's head and they believe it. And I mean, if Trump says it, there's probably a 99% chance it's not true. He just occasionally might stumble into the truth, but he will say absolutely anything, constantly just making stuff up, ridiculous numbers. He's going to cut drug prices by 1,600%, which means he's going to be giving us back money, I guess, if we pick up prescriptions. He doesn't understand math. He doesn't understand history. He doesn't understand literature or anything. But he does somehow have this appeal to people. And one of the really strange things about it, they're not progressive, they're not conservative, they're regressive. They want to take America back. And the question is, take America back from whom and to when? And basically they want to take America back from people they don't define as white, people who are not Christian, people who are not men. The slogan of the 1868 Democratic National Ticket, and this was when the Democrats were the pro-slavery people, right after the Civil War. They had been the pro-slavery people. And the two sides are very different from today. But the slogan was, America is a white man's country. Let white men rule. So that is exactly where these people are now. They want, and the emphasis on both of those people who are going to rule, not just white, but men. And so a lot of these people, their basic problem is a psychological malady that is not listed in the DSM-5, but ought to be. I call it MID, acute masculine insecurity disorder. That they are terrified. They define the sexes as completely opposite, and not opposite in a horizontal way, but in a vertical way. That man is superior to woman, and that then becomes the template for all other groups. White is superior to black, native to foreign born, my religion to your religion, all the rest of it, based on this template of man is superior to woman. And the really ironic thing, there's a lot of ironic things, but the one that's most ironic to me is the followers of the leaders, in this case Trump, turn themselves by their own definition into women. That is, dear leader, tell me what to think. I don't know what to think. It's sort of like Ilsa in Casablanca. Oh, Rick, you will have to think for both of us. Tell me what to believe. Tell me what is true. They bow down before the leader, and this is exactly what they think is the proper role for women. And yet at the same time, they're sort of tying themselves to the leader who they think is real manly, who is not real manly at all. He's about the opposite of that. But he's totally into this masculine insecurity thing himself, always boasting about the size of his organs and all sorts of nonsense. And so, but somehow, if we give ourselves entirely to this guy, his quote unquote masculinity will somehow infuse itself in us. But they're not acting the way they think men should act at all.
Gotcha. And it seems that a lot about power. You look at what people said about Trump before he was elected in 2016. You look at what they said about him. Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, and the late Lindsey Graham. And he's the answer to all their problems. And I'm assuming that's a power grab. Would you say that? Would you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, essentially the whole Republican Party. You talked about the word conservative Republican. That I don't know whether there's any way to force them to change their name, but the Republicans absolutely do not believe in a republic anymore. They believe in an authoritarian government. basically a dictatorship, what they refer to as the unitary executive theory. Well, the unitary executive means one man has all the power. That's also called an authoritarian government or a dictatorship. And so they don't believe in a republic. They don't want checks and balances. They want one guy to have all the power. And so I don't think the Democrats, for whatever problems they might have, do still believe in democracy, but the Republicans don't believe in a Republican form of government. And of course, as soon as he got power, and he makes it absolutely clear that the only way he will support you is if you become become a woman for him. I don't know what sort of language you want used here, but basically, you become my bitch, and then I'll take care of you. You don't, I'm going to get you beaten in a primary. You're not going to get anything. And so you either obey me, again, act like they think women should act, or you're out. And so they like where they are. They like having some. They don't have any power anymore, but they like the title and all that. But another factor, I think, is that a lot of them are really worried if they turn against Trump, that they or their families may be attacked and even killed. Because a lot of the really wild people on the Trump side, they just see such people as traitors, to our leader, to our God, to our golden calf, whatever he is, and threaten people like that. And so a lot of them are afraid, and they might say, well, I'm not really afraid for myself, but for my family. And there's some truth to that. But on the other hand, if you want to be a leader, you want people to elect you, you ought to be at least willing to take a chance for yourself. People defended democracy by fighting the Nazis in World War II. That was a lot more dangerous than speaking out against Trump.
Gotcha. In closing, how do we stop this? How do we stop this madness?
Yeah, well, I think they have control of basically the entire government except for the judiciary below the Supreme Court at the moment. And this was all this Project 2025 that they put out was a plan to do exactly this, basically to get rid of all the people who know anything in government, replace them with stooges that will be loyal to the leader, will do whatever he wants. Let's put somebody like Bobby Kennedy Jr. in charge of health. And it's like, clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here we are in Trump land again. And they put these people in there. They got rid of the experts. They got rid of even national intelligence. This joker that he put in charge of national intelligence, they had already weakened it, and Trump paid no attention to anything he didn't like from national intelligence anyway. But now this guy has fired 80% of them. We're much more open to a terrorist attack, open to making stupid mistakes like getting into the war in Iran, because those people aren't around, and those of them who do know what they're talking about who are around, Trump and the people around him pay no attention to. So as far as what do we do about it? Well, in the short run, we have to have the Democrats take over at a minimum the House in the elections in November. There's a growing chance they can take over the Senate as well, and they can put some check on Trump as a result of that. They'll be in control of holding hearings. Another thing that Trump and such authoritarians always do is use the position to just rake in as much money as corruptly as possible. I mean, it's unheard of what he's doing in corruption. Talk about Warren Harding. He had some bad folks around him, or Nixon even. There's nothing in comparison to Trump. He has, just in the whatever it is, 16, 17 months since he came back into office, probably taken in $4 billion. He gets schemed. He becomes more brazen all the time. Now he's setting up a thing where for $100,000 a month, a stock trading company can get advance word on what he's going to do so that they can do insider trading. He just comes out and says that, that's just what we're doing. His foreign policy runs on who will give him money. And so it's just, so we've got to get some check that way. In the longer run, a big problem is the Supreme Court, that they have these people, and a couple of them won't go quite as far as the really extreme one, but they said that the president is basically above the law.
Yeah.
And they're destroying, they've destroyed the Voting Rights Act, Take America Back to when? Well, certainly before the mid 60s, but back further and further and further, back to when we had a monarch, before the American Revolution. So the first step is trying to make sure that they're unsuccessful in stopping an actual free and fair election. They're intent on that now because there's no question that they will lose disastrously in a free and fair election, at least lose the House that way. And so they want to stop mail-in voting. They want to stop people from being able to use the IDs that they've used before their birth certificate has to be brought in to vote. I mean, it's ridiculous. But even if they don't get that passed, he is very likely to declare a national emergency and either call off the election entirely or send troops or his various goons from ICE to polling places to stop people from voting. So the first big hurdle is to get by this November election, get Democrats back in to serve as some sort of check on his power. And then we have to move towards getting somebody decent in the presidency in 2028.
Well, Bob, thank you so much. Any closing remarks for us?
Well, I always say I'm a congenital optimist, all the evidence to the contrary notwithstanding, but I remain optimistic. But I guess given our subject, I'd say be a Jesus follower. Actually, read what Jesus said and try to do that instead of what these people who claim to be Christians are telling you he said.
I totally agree with you. Well, Bob, thank you so much. I do appreciate you joining me today. And Jim, could not be here, so we do miss him. And I want to close with this. Hopefully you guys like what you saw. We do need subscribers. Yes, you can subscribe on YouTube, MS Happenings Podcast. Yes, we do need donations are always accepted and welcome. This is a free service. Cash App is the $ MS Happenings. PayPal is the @ Mississippi Happenings. Also, our email address is mshappenings1@gmail.com. And I will leave you with this. And it follows into what we talked about today is, may we never become indifferent to the suffering of others. Thanks so much.
Amen.